Morning.
Morning.
February 13th, 2022. Four measurables, which we say um, and in Buddhist practice, that's the first part of pretty much every Buddhist practice. And when we say this, you should really recognize the profundity and importance of this prayer, rather than it just being, something we're doing by rote, or something that you think someday you'll understand or someday you'll embody. It's like, connect to it. It's the truth now, as if you can really embrace all that, as if you can encompass it, because this is where we're going. This really is where we're going as practitioners. It's very, very, very powerful. That's why it is such an important component of practice all the time. So as we say this, really try to connect to what this is. When you're saying, may all beings have happiness, and we talk about this all the time, where we're coming from, we've divided people who are worthy of happiness, who are worthy of our compassion, which people are worthy of our kindness and our love. We're trying to go to this ultimate truth, this bigger picture, because even if our worst enemies, people who have done harm to you or your loved ones or harm to the world, if these people eventually do have true happiness, not temporal, worldly, power or grasping, we're talking about enlightenment, then all that suffering is gone. So that's where we're going. So when we say this prayer, we should really try to connect to that aspiration. So we'll say that now. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the cause of suffering. May all beings not be separated from the happiness that has never known suffering. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment, anger, and aversion. Yeah, that's really important. The same thing for the dedication at the end, and maybe we'll get to that later on. We're going to meditate. I'm going to turn things over to Victoria. Just something we talk about a lot. A lot of you have been here for quite a while now. You're practicing, you're sitting, you're meditating, you're working with your mind, you're listening to teachings. Maybe some of you have taken refuge, you're reading different texts. Maybe you are watching teachings on YouTube. We've been watching a lot of Khandro Rinpoche, Khandro Rinpoche on YouTube, who's blowing our mind all the time. She's amazing. And you're doing these things, practice, which is gigantic. And what also we try to stress is, how do we do this in life? How do we bring this into everyday life? What are we bringing into every? We talk about the ultimate truth being non-duality, interdependence, impermanence in these things. Those things are hard to kind of practice on a very minute level. How do we do it? Through the paramitas, right? Through generosity, through kindness, through discipline, through patience, all those things. That's how we can do it. I want to read a quote from Garchen Rinpoche, and I think is really important. If you were to practice mindful awareness with great diligence for just a month, if you were to and not allow your mind to wander off into delusion for that time, even in such a short time, you would witness great change. Fierce afflictions would not faze you so much anymore, because you would have gained personal experience in observing the illusory play. There is, in fact, just one remedy necessary: mindful awareness. It is the single sufficient remedy that transforms difficulties inside and out. We're bringing awareness into our lives. That's how we're going to practice this. With awareness, then we can practice real patience and kindness and generosity, rather than doing it with expectations of return and things like that. Awareness, we can start to make bigger aspirations, I think it's also important to recognize that your karma the karma that has led you to this point in your life, the karma that exists in your present moment all the time. What appears in front of you is your karma. Every person you come in contact with is coming into contact with you. You're coming into contact with them because of karmic connections. So instead of just labeling this person as the guy who I'm buying coffee from, the Uber driver or something, recognize this person as your immediate karmic connection. Bring your awareness, bring your mind to even the smallest exchange. I'm not saying you have to give this person everything in your wallet. I'm not saying you have to give this person your phone number. I'm not saying you have to give this person a hug or something like that. But be aware that for some karmic reason, this person has come into your view, into your mind, into your consciousness, and see how that changes how you can relate, you know. Make the connections between these aspirations we're making, this goal, this path we're on, and every single thing that happens in your life. When we start to bring that into practice, you will start to see things loosen a little bit. You will start to see space open up. You will see things, you will see energy shift and move. Let's do the 9 purifying breaths and meditate for 9 minutes. Last breath, we project out the crown chakra into merging consciousness with space, into meditation. back to the breath. Remember, the crux of this is becoming aware of what your mind is doing, becoming aware that you're thinking, and leaving the thought, letting it feel you analogy, visual. The thought's the cloud that, which is the mind, limitless, clear, unstained blue sky, and dissolves back into it. Or just go back to the breath. Focus your attention on the space between the upper lip and the nose. That's a little easier. And the most difficult, maybe not, depending. The thought arises, and then just think of mind looking at mind, mind seeing the thought. And you can think about what is that, what mind sees that thought, what is seeing that thought. And then just rest in that mind. Clarity of mind, the calm. And it's a back and forth. Recognition, letting go. Great. Bringing this kind of awareness into, like what we were talking about, your day-to-day existence and life, and we label people immediately as things. I love when I meet someone or come in contact with someone and I immediately have these prejudices and ideas about them, and then they become completely upended when I discover a little bit more about that person. So you can bring that awareness, and a judgment comes in, a thought, a reaction, an emotion, and just let that dissipate and stay in the moment. Bring patience, bring awareness into the moment, and see what deeper exchange, what deeper moment arises, more space to it. The last thing I'll say before I turn this over to Victoria, in the chat function, Nick wrote, please send us feedback. We have a Gmail, Michael Imperioli Meditation 101. Feedback about what things that are not clear, some of the things we're talking about that you're stuck on, that you need more elaboration. Maybe it's a suggestion about that you feel that could benefit the class. Let us know what's working, what's not working, how we can help. It's really important, and we appreciate that. Victoria will take it from here.
Good morning, everyone. To elaborate on Michael's point, we didn't really discuss it, but what he emphasized at the beginning of the class, that the four immeasurables should not be just rattled out. The fact of the matter is that the entirety of the Buddhist path is about recovering our bodhicitta. It is recovering our mind. It is recovering our wellness. And it is recovering the truth of the natural state of being, and it is recovering the only sane way of being in the world. So what we have covered in the last 6 stanzas, the transcendent activities of the bodhisattvas, which should be what we should model our behavior on, our life on. Namely dana, giving, shila, ethical discipline, shanti, patience, virya, diligence, effort, joyful effort, dhyana, the meditation, which is the presence of awareness, and prajna, understanding how things really, really are. So how are things? So we have to ask ourselves, how are things? And so why do we call these, transcendent activities of the bodhisattvas? After all, generosity, patience, ethical behavior, they're nothing but just very natural things that we should be engaged in. They should be just, commonsensical, daily, routine things that we engage in. We should want to have these things in our lives as a constant presence. We want, we should want to feel present with others and equal and non-dual. We should want that kind of wisdom. This is our basic, simple, natural state. But why are these things called transcendent actions, transcendent wisdom, when in reality they're simply common sense? And I'll give you an example. What makes it, why do we practice and we engage in Buddhist practice in order to recover these simple, what should be our daily basic things? And the example is like this. I am walking on the street and it's a deserted street, and I witness a horrible car crash, and I see people, that are bleeding, that, need help, and suddenly, I hear a little bleep on my phone. And I look around, of course, to see if there are any others, if somebody else can help them, or, and suddenly I hear a bleep on my phone and I realize I have to be at the cafe meeting my friend for, a business lunch. And at that very moment, yes, so when I see people suffering in the car, bleeding, and their car, maybe going on fire, there's a thing inside me that instinctually wakes up, and I go to myself, yes, I need to help them. The kind of primary instinct is to help, is that we feel empathy, is that we know the right thing to do. We innately, instinctively know that we should reach out and abandon everything and run and help, but then the bleep on my phone goes off and my consciousness shifts and goes, oh, but this is a very important appointment to me, and I really need to meet this friend. And, this is my kind of favorite breakfast. So for sure, somebody else will come along and make the 911 call. And for sure, somebody else will run to that burning car and pull these people out. What is that's working at that moment, in our mind? What is that's covering up our, primary instinct to help? And what is covering that up is our ego. And Garchen Rinpoche, there's a beautiful book by Garchen Rinpoche called Sem, The Mind, that everyone can get on Amazon. And he says that this ego, the ego ignorance, is namely composed out of 3 things, and that is fear, selfishness or self, and selfishness and self are the same thing, and confusion, because we really don't know what to do, when the ego takes over and the fear takes over, when we have this primary instinct to protect ourselves as opposed to help others, when that takes over, we're really lost. That's why, our primary instinct to help others is covered up by this thing of selfishness and stupidity. Appointment, friend, fool ourselves, gonna come by, they're gonna call 911, they're gonna do what I'm supposed to do, right? So this is the really kind of the state in which we find ourselves on basis. Our basic covered up by this disease. This is the mind of self-grasping, the you know, I am a good, but we really have to examine and see how all of that is filtered through our selfishness. So they call that in Buddhism co-emergent ignorance. What is co-emergent ignorance? Is that the true nature, I have to run and help those people, and I don't need to thinking I'm going to get hurt or, the self-sacrifice, because that's the thing to do. I have to go over there and help them and, pull them out of the car, then call 911. But at the same time, what's co-emergent with this is the selfish instinct, the selfishness that goes, oh no, somebody else is going to come along. They're going to call 911. The policeman will come, the fireman will come. I don't need to be here. I can walk off to my appointment. So that's what co-emergent ignorance is. And that really has to tell us where we are. That's a real state, where we are all the time. And that's actually why we engage in practice. It's because we have this veil, we have this ignorance that is completely driven by selfishness and self-cherishing, this confusion, this fear, and this, main predominant need to always think about ourselves first, put ourselves first. That blindness is actions. And it is due to this current condition, ignorance that is deeply rooted in self-grasping, is that why we engage in practice. So what's wrong with this picture? Why are we not running to save people in the car? Why are we continuing to walk to our appointment? Because, we remember, we say to ourselves, no, somebody else will come along and, deal with this horror and help these people. What's wrong with this picture is everything. It means that our mind and our heart can no longer be guided by its true innate mechanisms. That first instinct, I should help, I am here, this is my, this is my karma, I should go and rescue these people out of this car. We know what the right action is, but immediately the first instance that we know what the right action is, when the empathic, feeling awakens upon, merely gazing on the situation, right away, it is clouded and covered by selfishness. We go, no, somebody else will deal with it. I am, after all, I'm late for my appointment. So egoistic, and we have to acknowledge that. Even if our ego tells us this is the right thing to do, like I should go to my appointment because this is a very important appointment. After all, it's a business appointment. I need to be there, we should understand that there's no basic sanity in that. We should understand that our ego is convincing us to be basically insane, because our ego is thwarting the right action, the right wisdom, the right conduct. This other direction, of creating negative karma, of being blind, and everything that comes along with it. It's like walking into a disease, from basic health, from sanity to insanity, and like I said, you making that choice, forget about the karma that comes from this choice and this kind of action. And we should not be surprised when we are suffering ourselves and no one comes to help. All we have to do is look back and think about, many, many chances we have had in our life to act the right way, but we were swayed by our ego. Our sanity got covered up by this ego grasping, our mind got clouded, and we had no tools and we had no means to be not persuaded by it, because thick and so long-standing that we had almost no chance of acting the right way, of choosing the right path. So if we do want to stand on the Buddhist path, if we want to be the bodhisattvas who practice the 6 paramitas, we have to become a person who gains insight into this madness and the cause of this madness. We have what is inherently true and right, our basic nature, our basic sanity and goodness, of what is wrong, that which is our habitual ego tendency, which tells us what to do. And we have to try to gain our real sight, our real nature back. We have to try to get ourselves back from this thwarted, insane kind of a way of being and living. This is what Lojo in. We train it in bodhicitta. That's the entirety of the Buddhist path. In fact, none of the main Buddhist tenets are not at all particularly Buddhist. They are in fact universal. I mean, what are these 6 paramitas? What is generosity? What is ethical discipline? What is things? Are they particularly Buddhist or particularly, belong to this religion or to that religion? No, they are inherently universal traits with which we should live. They should be our traits. They should be our sanity. They should be the way that we function healthily in this universe, in this life. So we become Buddhists, we train in Buddhist tenets to get our nature back, to get back these things like generosity, patience, perseverance and diligence, and mental awareness and meditation, and awareness, prajna, because we need that nature back. We have to understand that our practice is finding the usurper, the ego, and we have to work very, very hard to eliminate it. Our true nature, our true innate quality is bodhicitta. It is not self-grasping, and it's not the stupidity that accompanies that state. Our innate nature is mind of enlightened compassion. It is prajna and love. It is compassion based on an unshakable understanding of emptiness, which transcends the self-grasping and ignorance, and understands the non-duality of all existence, of all sentient beings in it. We meditate to familiarize and habituate that true innate nature of mind, selfless compassion, bodhicitta. That is the heart of Buddhist practice, and it is the true nature of our mind. This is our true essence. It is not selfishness and not self-grasping. Self and self-grasping, the belief that the self is true, and secondly, that it is the most important of all things, is the very obstacle that is the cause of suffering, the cause of being here in samsara, and it is that which separates us from our nature. That's what separates us from running and helping those people in the burning car and sends us to our appointment. In other words, sends us back into the samsaric wheel, because it's really sending us to future suffering. Right in that moment, in that choice, we are creating more negative karma, and we will most likely will encounter exactly the same circumstance when we are burning in the car and there's no one there to help us, because that's what karma is. The karma is like a curing effect. It's teaching us all the time. It's showing us what we have done wrong. If we want to know, what we have done in previous life, we'll look at this moment right now, and if we're having suffering, we should understand that, this is the suffering we have caused, or we have not, tried to help in a previous moment. And that's why we're experiencing what we're experiencing right now. Our one and only enemy is self-cherishing and the stupidity. Stupidity meaning that self is the most important thing, or that it's even existent, that is the real enemy. It's, ego is like a peanut of stupidity. And the 5 poisons are the shell, which hold that peanut in place. Self-grasping, in other words, ignorance, is the nucleus, and the 5 poisons are like the tentacles. It's like if you've seen, all the time we're watching on TV now, the cell of a virus, of the COVID virus. So the round ball is the self-grasping and the belief in the self, and the tentacles are the 5 poisons. Self-cherishing is the enemy because it's the expression in the world. Because its expression in the world is always and unchangeably filtered through the 5 poisons. Whenever their self expresses itself, self-cherishing expresses itself, as opposed to our bodhicitta expressing itself. As every time self-cherishing expresses itself in the world, it happens through the 5 poisons. For example, when we say to our loved one, I love you, right? Do we say it through our bodhicitta, meaning I love you and I wish you to be free, and all I want is that you have love and you're bathed in it, and you have that support and you're lit up by it and you have this presence in your life? Or do we say I love you and we expect to hear I love you back? And if that person doesn't say I love you back, the next moment it becomes, oh, I hate you, you bastard. And then, but you said it, you said it to me yesterday, so why aren't you saying it today? And that whole, so this is, it's not what we say, it's the mind with which we say things. Do we say to our children, I love you, and we expect that they behave, conform, and do everything like mirror our wishes and desires? Or do we say to our children, I love you, and we support them, we give them wings? This is, that's the difficulty of examining and knowing truly the state of our mind. And that's where Buddhist practice comes in. Because with the ego, the usurper, it's so deeply embedded, we have no idea really of what we say, how we say it, when we say it. And that's where mindfulness and awareness, this beautiful quote Michael read from Rinpoche, Rinpoche said that the only remedy to all the mental illness, to all the difficulty, is loving kindness awareness. It's being aware from which mind. Is it the mind of our Buddha nature, or is this the mind of this selfish ego with its tentacles, with which we say and we live in every moment? Because it's in every moment that this is happening. It's not like happening once or twice a day. It's happening every single instance. In every moment, we have to be aware, because in every moment, there is a choice. Because, that's, even when we're asleep, the mind is always happening, awareness is always happening, life is always happening. There is no life like this label that's stationary and permanent. That's delusion. We know that. Impermanence is our condition. Impermanence is also beautiful because we can go from stupid to bodhicitta. So that, that emptiness of impermanence is actually like a huge benefit, because it means that we can change, that we can adapt, we can go from being unhealthy, being selfish, to being, healthy again, and regaining our nature, regaining our Buddhahood, regaining our basic sanity. Because that's what Buddhahood really is. A lot of it is like our, it is our basic condition. It is that, basis from which nothing could ever happen, because that usurper, co-emergent ignorance, it's co-emergent because you need the sanity, you need the Buddha nature for insanity to kind of come and cover it up and, dirty it up. That's why it is said that, these stains are called adventitious stains because they are not permanent. They arise and they can be removed, as opposed to our nature, the basic goodness, our bodhicitta, is something that goes with us from lifetime to lifetime. That moment when I see a burning car and I say, I'm here. I need to be the one to help and jump in and do it, and not be persuaded by the ego that I should be moving on to my important appointment. That bodhicitta, that is our nature. That always comes with us. That's primordial mind. Through the mind of self-cherishing, we see everything only in terms of me and myself. We become demanding and unreasonable and very aggressive in asserting that which we feel should be ours. We demand reality that mirrors and satisfies our wishes and our addictions. And we tell ourselves that that is the real picture of the world. My lunch is important. It's a business lunch. We only see our point, and we want other people to see our point too. We say the words that we want to hear, words that only we approve. We want people to see only our point. Because we are important, we are special. That's the ego. That's really quite mad, isn't it? But in our habituation, we no longer notice how mad this picture is. The ego has totally taken over our bodhicitta, our nature. If we can add to our bank account, we have no problem making someone homeless and destitute. We will make money on death, on suffering, on misery all day long, and we will be completely blind to it. It's all a part of the ego delusion, and yet we never feel really happy. Not even if it's if we get another home, we get another car, we get another fur coat. It's never enough. This crazy picture, it's like, this movie, I said it's like a horror flick, with the biggest house and the most cars and the most fur coats, it's a horror movie. And that's why we need to remove the mind of self-cherishing to gain our mind back, to gain our bodhicitta back, our prajna back. It is like removing cancer from a healthy body. We do so that we can gain and relate to our innate compassion, to our goodness and wisdom, because that is our true nature. Buddhahood is our true nature. Ego is like the disease. It's the disease that is like a cataract on our eyes. That's why we engage in the Buddhist path. We engage in the paramitas, simply to regain our natural state and our sanity back. And what do we mean by that? The greater is the attachment to the self, the greater is the delusion, because whatever we perceive is a narrative of the ego. Am I comfortable? Do I have enough? Is this all I should have had? Our worldview is completely thwarted by the attachment to the ego. Our ego tells us that it benefit me. Yeah, I can take away someone's home if I can add to my bank account. Sure, it's okay. I can go house hunting and go look at foreclosures. Sure, it's okay, because that's the cheapest version. It's like the best version that suits me. Why do I need to think about someone else? Our world becomes very narrow and pale. And we no longer remember the nature of our intrinsic goodness and mental capacity. We forget, ethical discipline. We forget giving. We forget, patience. What do we need that for? As long as our ego is getting what it wants, We smother our children, our spouses. We blame our parents and others in general for all our failures as human beings. We live in a state of hypocrisy. But we're satisfied with our narrow, little, smug self, even if we're miserable to the very core. We live in a state of hypocrisy, but we're satisfied. We're trained from childhood. I am the most important person. My needs are the most important and come before the needs of others. Me, my. And we become very, very deeply hypocritical and smug in our little ego masks. We go to animal rights protests and pour paint on people in fur coats. And then at night, we go to a fancy restaurant to discuss these tremendous actions over a nice, juicy steak, and, feed our little pet that little pieces of that steak. That's hypocrisy. That is our ego. That is like not examining what are we really doing. Why are we going to these animal rallies, animal protection rallies, or pouring, paint on people's fur coats if we're going to be eating steak? So we need to really kind of, we need to have clarity. We need to know what we're doing. We don't get fooled by your ego and become, spiritual materialism and feel like, oh, I've done a good thing today. I gave that guy, $1 on the street, but I can go and buy a foreclosed home. That's okay, because I gave the guy $1 today. If we suffer self-grasping and aggression of the 5 poisons, which are the tentacles through which we handle life, then we better go in for surgery. Removing self-grasping allows for our innate goodness and wisdom to return to us. Our nature, our mind, and our heart. The mind of self-cherishing is like I said, it's like a cancer. That's why in Buddhism 101, we start with dismantling the ego. That is the true Buddhist path, because it makes us sick. Karma happens, mostly negative karma that causes enormous suffering. And we create that because when we get swayed by the ego, karma is the only possible thing that can happen to us. Traversing the Buddhist path requires complete and painful honesty and self-examination. We are in fact training to recognize and eliminate the self-obsessing, self-cherishing mind, and with it, the self-obsessions themselves, the 5 poisons. Remember, the tree and the root are the same, are one. There's no need to hack at little branches. We need to cut the root. That is, we have to remove the self-cherishing, and then the 5 poisons will diminish on their own. Garchen Rinpoche, in one of her teachings that is so profound on Lojong, said, it's so funny that we have to become Buddhist simply to remember our love. I mean, this is really all that's happening. We take the Buddhist path to gain just these simple things, like allowing our natural good instinct to surface, allowing mindfulness and awareness to be present in every moment, allowing us to regain generosity, ethical conduct, patience, effort, mental awareness, which is meditation, and prajna. It's, knowing that ego doesn't exist. We become Buddhist in order to gain these very, very simple, like we become Buddhist, namely to gain our nature back. And that's what we really have to remember. We need to understand that that's what we train in. So, that's what the Buddhist path really is. There is nothing, and when I look back at what our teacher has taught us with everything, he's never taught us anything but, bodhicitta, the relative bodhicitta, where we do, with awareness that there is non-duality, because the awareness of emptiness, knowing that there is no self, allows us not to be so attached to me and mine, and it dissolves the sense of this me, I and the other, this dualistic perception. Out of having the prajna, out of having the wisdom of non-duality, of emptiness, we can let go of a lot of these egoistic tendencies, and then we can work with the relative bodhicitta. That's understanding bodhicitta in terms of emptiness and non-duality. That's absolute bodhicitta. And then the relative bodhicitta is working in the world with the 6 paramitas, working to benefit others, knowing that others are more important than the self, dissolving the self while trying to, work toward our true Buddha nature. And with that in mind, we read stanza number 31 in the Sublime 37 Bodhisattva Practices by Ngulchen Tomei Zangpo, Garchen Rinpoche's heart practice. And the stanza number 31 says, if merely having the appearance of a practitioner, one does not investigate one's own mistakes, it is possible to act contrary to the Dharma. Therefore, constantly examining one's own errors and abandoning them is the Bodhisattva's practice. It is very easy to add to our library of tendencies and say, well, I am a businessman, I am a this, and I'm a very important person, and now I am a Buddhist, so I am better than you, and I can club you with my Buddhism on your head. And we fall into this kind of a horrendous schism again. We become more egoistic if we really don't examine and we don't act through our bodhicitta nature, but act through our self-grasping nature. If we add being a Buddhist to our self-grasping nature, it becomes another hammer with which we hurt the world, with which we hammer others. So please be very, very aware, in every single moment, in every single instance, every time you say, I love you, or you give $1 to someone, or you give a meal to someone, whatever you do, every moment that your body, speech, and mind performs in action, please be aware of its source. Does it come from bodhicitta? Because that's Buddhism. Or does it come from selfishness? That's ordinary, deluded, dualistic mind. You can easily add being a Buddhist to your ordinary, dualistic, ignorant mind. But please make no mistake that it's because of the source of where your action comes. It could be categorized as a Buddhist action, meaning that you're just being mindful, or that you're being the usual normal asshole in the world, based on ignorance. The next stanza is influenced by disturbing emotion.
Do that. Save that one.
Save that.
We're getting close to the end here. That's a whole other can of worms. We have a few minutes left for questions, which we'll take now. If you have any, please write it into the Q&A section. This may sound funny, but is there an alternative to the 9 purifying breaths that has the same general idea, fighting a sinus infection? If you can't, if there's something blocking you, then, you don't have to do that. You can just go, you can just go right into your meditation. If you're having trouble with breathing in your sinus, you could breathe through the mouth. You don't have to breathe through the nose. When speaking of karma, bodhicitta, now you're putting those two words together, and I'm not sure in what context you're putting those two words together, because they're related, but they're different. I went over to help 2 men banging on a window to get into a car. He said a child was locked in. I began to hit the window. Moments later, several police cars pulled up, guns drawn. They were carjackers and called me very lucky. My karma. Your karma was to be in that situation at that moment. A lot of people get stuck on karma being the result of an action, which it is. But there's karma that has led to that being in that situation. That's what we have to understand. For instance, so a friend of mine is involved in a dispute with his sisters over an estate of the dead parent, the dead mother, right? And the sisters are doing some very unethical things to my friend. My friend says, well, they're going to have really bad karma from doing this, which is true. But my friend also has to understand that him being abused here, being kind of stolen from, basically, by his siblings, is his karma based on his prior actions. It's not just this punishment reward system. We have to remember that, to me, and I think the concept of something being random is a label, and I don't think it's a truth to anything. If you really examine everything that happens on the smallest level, on the largest, everything has cause and effect. If you really look at it, Not a thing happens. If a tree falls and lands on a house, there's the structure of the where the house was, the structure of the tree said that it got hit by a car once and weakened one side. It didn't just fall on this house for no reason. There was causes and conditions that led to it. Everything has it. I don't have the ability to see what your prior life was like that led, prior actions in this life or prior ones. Because with karma, from a Buddhist point of view, you have to link karma to prior lifetimes. And when you talk about reincarnation in prior lifetimes, you also have to talk about the Buddhist concept of self. Self does not have inherent existence. There is some sense of self. We have to operate with this body. We have to operate with our current situations. I can't say, well, there's no self, so I'm really a billionaire with a private jet. That's, there's basic sanity. There is something that we're working with. It's just not how we've been conditioned to see it. You know what I mean? And so what gets reincarnated is consciousness. They use the example, one good example is if you take a candle, a lit candle with a flame, you take another candle that's not lit, and you light the unlit candle from that flame. Now you have a new flame, and you put out that old flame. Is it the same flame, or is it a different flame? Well, it's not the same candle. It's not the same flame because that first flame is gone. But what is this? It's definitely completely related to this other one. What if you are always first to help and jump in for others, but no reciprocity from your surroundings? How not to become resentful? Good question.
That's the whole point. If you're expecting reciprocity, you're working through your ego. That means that you're not doing an action based uh, on this understanding of bodhicitta that you're there, and if you can help, that you don't need any further anything. You don't need to be acknowledged. You do it because it's the right action. You do it because it's the right motivation to help. If you're motivated by expecting a treat in return, you're not doing it from the right place. And that's exactly what I've just been talking about. Knowing if we're motivated by bodhicitta, which simply gives love and is, does not require anything in return, because its happiness rests in knowing clearly that it comes and is motivated by this freedom, by this mind of love and clarity. If you're expecting a reward, like a little treat because you do this and this, you need to really look at it again and examine that action.
So, how not to become resentful is by
By turning to your bodhicitta, by giving love freely, by not expecting stuff in return, by not being conditioned by your ego. If you're expecting a reward, that means your action is coming completely from your ego, and it's a very difficult, precarious situation. We've lived with our ego, our entire lives. So dismantling the ego is very difficult, and that's what the work we do here. That's the awareness.
Lisa Rinsler asks, can you please list the 6 paramitas one more time and their Tibetan names?
The names are Sanskrit names, and it is Dana. Dana means generosity, and it's really wanting to give enlightenment to all beings. That's the real big sense of Dana. Shila, ethical conduct. Shila, it means, that, we work, based on this desire to give the real, our ethical behavior gives because of our aspiration to give, enlightenment to all beings. Shanti, patience. It means that we understand karma, cause and effect, and we understand the Four Noble Truths. We understand the truth of suffering. That's Shanti. Virya, effort, diligence, perseverance, is that we're willing to work for the benefit of sentient beings endlessly and with a joyful presence. Dhyana is meditation, and that means presence of awareness, and prajna is knowing that there is no self and other. We are, reality is one single thing. There's no me and other. That's prajna.
Name the one main way this practice has changed your life? I mean, you're talking about Buddhist practice in general. For me personally, there's there's many ways I feel. One that comes to mind is I feel I come in conflict much less with other people. I honestly have found that. What about you? One way it's changed your life.
I mean, it's changed life in every single way. There's certainly so much more happiness. Happiness has replaced a lot of neediness. I need this. I want more of this. I find myself not wanting all the time, not craving all the time, and finding like a happiness, a contentment with many things, and also really falling in love with the world and falling in love with others, with people, seeing people kind of almost for the first time.
And please remember, we're practitioners. We're not. We're helping you study these things. We're not teachers. We always encourage finding authentic teachers. If you're inspired to become a Buddhist, take refuge with an authentic teacher from a lineage. I post them in my posts and stories, the hashtags when I promote this class. Like Garchen Rinpoche, Khandro Rinpoche. There's many. And also remember, we're talking about our experiences. We, our practitioners, we struggle, we fail, we fall short all the time. We're not talking from this some place of feeling like we've got it down by any sense, by any stretch. But you asked how it's changed. Like I said, I come into conflict less. It's not that I'm walking away from conflict per se, but the energy that I feel like I bring to situations somehow inspires less conflict, if that makes sense.
May I add to that,
Sure.
please? So the antidote to this ego self-cherishing mind, this mind of delusion, what is the antidote to that? And the antidote is said to be refuge. We have to have some place where we give up this self-grasping, and that is the Buddha nature. In order to know the Buddha nature, we have to have Buddha Dharma, the teaching that teaches us how to progress along the path. And and we have the Sangha, that is the teacher. He's that candle that brings the light into the darkness of our mind. I urge you, all of you, to seek out a teacher who lives the Buddha Dharma, who is compassion, like our teacher, Garchen Rinpoche. In fact, I see all the time that there is nothing in his entire life. I feel like from morning to night, all he does are acts of compassion and thinking about us. When he says prayers, when he eats, when he does really any activity, it's nothing but having compassion for all sentient beings and desiring for us to have enlightenment, and not to be plagued by the suffering that is caused by our selfishness. We wander in the dark because of selfishness and the delusion, creating more and more karma. And I know that Rinpoche's entire life is dedicated to dispelling that darkness. And so I urge all of you to find a great teacher, to follow a great master, to follow the light, and that is how you dispel the darkness.
Should you judge yourself for not being able to put your ego away 100%, or is this also practicing selfishness? Is it possible to reduce the feeling of guilt? Well, you shouldn't judge yourself, period. What you learn. You start to learn if you become aware that you weren't able to first of all, you're probably not going to be able to put your ego away 100% until you reach some state of enlightenment. So you have to practice progress, not perfection, as they say. You know what I mean? Progress. And learn from when you can't. When you can't put your ego aside and you act out of your ego and you feel the repercussions of that and you see it, learn from it and just say, wow, make amends when it's possible, unless you're going to hurt somebody by doing that. You don't make amends to somebody if it's going to kind of take a scab off an old wound just to make yourself feel better, just to alleviate some sense of guilt. You make amends, and then you make an aspiration and you make a resolve to say, I am not going to engage in this behavior again. So the next time, you're in a situation that triggers it, this may come into you, it may not. You may do the same thing because we're habituated to it. Or you may be reminded, I made a resolve not to do this thing. So yeah, if you're judging yourself, you're practicing selfishness because you're staying in the problem rather than solution. You're kind of connecting and staying with the habituation, which there's no productivity in that. It is productive to learn from your mistakes. You know what I mean? Is it possible? And I think that would, like as you say, reduce the feeling of guilt. That will help do it because guilt is really kind of a useless thing unless you can really learn from it. Unless you can, the point is to learn from the mistakes, to see how the ego was engaged and how it operated, and then have a little awareness that you can step away. You can have a moment of awareness, and the next time you're confronted with similar situations and behave differently.
Also, feeling guilty can be one of these kinds of tricky mechanisms of the ego where you say to yourself, well, I'm a good person, I feel guilty. So just to make sure that that's not the end point of all, make sure that you learn and have patience to yourself. You have to know you're not a Buddha right now, right? Your enlightenment is not fully blossomed, have patience with yourself, and make a vow to change your behavior, to be aware, remember when a situation like this, arises again, that the same activities and the same mindset is not triggered, through selfishness. So, you learn, you make a result for the next time, but don't just, make sure you're not saying, I'm a good person because I feel guilty, because a lot of times that's how the ego fools us into it.
Can you have bad and good karma at the same time? I mean, I think in general, there's the interplay of these things until we reach enlightenment. That's our life, is going to be this, interplay. For example, this person says, I got cancer, which is bad karma. It's the result. The cancer is the result of, certain, actions in the past that resulted in this bad karma. But at the same time, I've been met with the most loving kindness and support from so many people, more than I can ever have imagined. I feel this is good karma. I've been told this is because of the way I've treated others in the past, and it's coming back at me. I'm not angry at the cancer. I'm almost done treatment, but it does feel confusing that it happened in the first place. Yeah, it's confusing because we think, why do bad things happen to good people? And we just feel that it's, a result of the coldness of the universe and an unjust universe. That's why Buddhism, we don't divorce it from that perspective of reincarnation, of this, endless line of consciousness that connects us to many lifetimes. So we don't know why. You can't always pin it to this lifetime. You can't always pin it to this direct cause and effect that you can see and become aware of. What you can do, though, when negative circumstances arise, and this is really, 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 really important, going through difficult circumstances, going through painful circumstances, going through suffering, when you go through that, you are purifying those seeds that are resultant of negative actions that have caused negative karma. So it's painful and you're going through it, but it's almost as if you're burning off whatever actions cause that negative karma, and you're transcending that. So you can, in a way, look at it through some positive light, like you're saying. And the result of being met with, like you say, most loving kindness and support from so many people, more than you can imagine, is the result of also probably burning off this negative karma and reaping the fruition of good actions in the past. So I think that's really amazing that you're aware of that and that that's happening. How not to be used people, how to have boundaries with helping others, not expecting a reward with helping, but also not being used by others.
Use your discernment.
Yeah. Make boundaries.
Absolutely.
That's exactly right. I mean, I have a friend who's suffering with addiction, and she has a lot of negative influence from family who are in her business. You know what I mean? And telling this, how do I make a boundary? Stop taking their calls. Just say, I need some space. it's very simple. You have to use wisdom. It's like if she used that example of the car accident and helping someone. Well, not expecting a reward because it's the thing to do. The reward in itself is being able to do something very beneficial, something out of a certain sense of compassion and loving kindness. And also not being used by others. Well, you don't allow that person to pull you into a burning car if you can't. You don't allow someone to steal from you. It's creating boundaries. And that also takes why we practice meditation and work with our mind to develop some sort of, like Victoria said, prajna, wisdom, discernment, understanding when a situation is toxic, when a situation is negative. We don't know, we can be trapped by habitual patterns and tendencies that don't allow us to see that this relationship, this situation actually is very toxic. That takes time, that takes mindfulness and awareness, and that's what we're cultivating in this class, and that's what you're cultivating in your practice in general. I mean, more importantly, thank you very much. I want to thank our Nick. Dear Nick Solidio, who runs all this technical work. This Zoom webinar is his offering to us and to the Dharma, and it's a very, very, very generous and kind thing to do. And none of this would be possible without him. And we always have to remember that. So thank you for being here. Like we spoke about the first part, the four immeasurables being very important. Same thing with this dedication. Buddhist practice almost always has this beginning, middle, and end. The middle is the practice itself or the teaching. The beginning is the dedication. The beginning is to make aspirations, set intentions. Now we're going to dedicate the merit, because practice brings merit. It's the cause of good karma. It's creating good circumstances for the future. But we're doing this not just for us. We're doing it for the benefit of all beings. So that's what we're going to dedicate the merit, to the benefit of all beings, by saying this closing prayer. It's like dropping our little drop of merit into the ocean of wisdom and being together with the Buddhas. One drop of water in the ocean becomes the ocean. It's not separate anymore, right? By this merit may all beings attain the state of enlightenment and conquer the enemies of faults and delusions. May they be liberated from this ocean of samsara and its pounding waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. Thank you very much. We will see you soon.